What's good, people? Thank you as always for passing by the channel. Much appreciated. Hit that subscribe button if you guys are new. All right, so Frank Warren has confirmed that he has won the purse bid for Josh Warrington versus Kid Galahad. I love the way he's put it out there that he's won the purse bid, right? Even though I think we already knew in the lead up to the purse bids that he was always going to win. Eddie Hearn confirmed, I think, on numerous interviews that he was going to put a bid in, but it wasn't going to be anything substantial just because he knew that Frank was going to put a bigger purse bid because Frank was going to put it on pay-per-view and Eddie Hearn was going to put it on regular Sky Sports Boxing. And that would have been a great fight on regular Sky Sports Boxing. But nonetheless, Frank Warren's won the purse bid, the fight goes ahead. That's the good thing. The reason I say that is because there was a lot of chatter, and I think I've done a video about this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, that Oscar Valdez versus Josh Warrington was going to go ahead. But that isn't the case anymore. And I can understand why it's not going ahead, right? Initially, the talks with Valdez were about champion versus champion, a unification fight, and that would have been great, right? 2 unbeaten guys going at it, 2 belts on the line. It doesn't have the same ring to it with Josh Warrington having to vacate the IBF. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good fight, but it doesn't have the same ring to it. And for Josh Warrington, surely, if you're going to fight Valdez without a belt, you're going to get less money. Right? I mean, going to the table with a belt, it could have been 50-50. Without a belt, you're probably looking at a 70-30 split. And again, it just doesn't make sense. So it makes sense to fight Kid Galahad. He'll get the majority of the purse, which I'm guessing will be around that 7-figure mark. So it's good money. And I'm wondering, could it happen at Ellen Road again? Probably could happen at Ellen Road. They could get 30 to 40,000 in there. So look, ticket sales will be fantastic as well. And it's a great fight. Kid Galahad brings problems that Lee Selby and Carl Frampton don't bring, right? So it could be a tougher fight. So credit to Josh Warrington for fighting back-to-back fights against Lee Selby, Carl Frampton, and now Kid Galahad. And if he does beat Kid Galahad, then obviously those unification fights with, I don't know, Gary Russell Jr. or Valdez or Santa Cruz are on the horizon. And then it becomes an even bigger star. So it's a good fight. I've already noticed that some people are already complaining about the idea that the fight will be on pay-per-view. And again, that's not been confirmed yet, but it's more likely to be on pay-per-view. Unfortunately, look, and I don't agree with this, but some fights have to be on pay-per-view to be made. That's just, unfortunately, the economics of boxing. Boxing budgets sometimes don't allow for fights to be made, so they have to be chucked on pay-per-view in the hope that they will actually then make their money back. And what I mean by this, and this is a good example, I spoke to Lou DiBella, name drop, recently, and we were speaking about pay-per-view, and we actually started speaking about Terence Crawford versus Victor Postal. I don't know if you guys remember, that was a unification fight. That was his first fight on pay-per-view. And everyone was like, what is Terence Crawford doing on pay-per-view? He's not a pay-per-view draw. HBO didn't have the budget to put that on regular HBO. That is what everyone wanted, right? And it made sense for Terence Crawford to be on regular HBO and then you start building Crawford. They didn't have the budget. So Bob Arum and HBO decided to put that fight on pay-per-view, not because they thought it was a pay-per-view fight, but that was the only way that fight was going to be made. That was the only way they could almost guarantee the fighters' purses. And I remember reading that for them to actually break even, they only needed to do 50,000 pay-per-view buys. And I think it actually done around 50,000 pay-per-view buys. So it's not always because a fight is pay-per-view worthy that it goes on pay-per-view. Sometimes it's because broadcasters simply can't afford or don't have the budget to actually pay the fighters' purses to put it on regular BT Sports. They just can't afford it. So I guess if you're Frank Warren, you're hoping that the fight does, I don't know how much is BT pay-per-view. Let's just say £20 to make it easier. You're hoping that the fight does around 120,000 pay-per-view buys, which it could, and then you know you're covered. If it doesn't, he has a problem. It's very similar when you think about it to James DeGale versus Chris Eubank Jr. A lot of people are complaining that that fight's on ITV box office. ITV simply don't have the boxing budget to put that fight on regular ITV. I know a lot of people will talk about sponsors, but they simply don't have the budget. So they are chucking it on ITV box office and praying that that fight makes around, I don't know. I'm guessing that James and Chris will probably ask for 7 figures. So again, they're probably begging and praying that that fight makes around 100,000 pay-per-view buys. If it does, then they break even, everyone's fine, everyone goes home happy. If it doesn't, then I guess the problem and the deficit falls onto Al Heyman and PBC to cover costs. So look, going back to Josh Warrington versus Kid Galahad, is it a pay-per-view fight? Probably not. But can BT Sports afford to put it on regular pay-per-view and cover the cost? Probably not. So they are gambling, and Frank Warren is praying that if it does go on pay-per-view, and we're talking about potentially going on pay-per-view, that it does, again, 150,000 pay-per-view buys just to cover the cost of everything. If not, then fuck me, it all falls onto Frank Warren's ass. And we know what Frank Warren's like when it comes to that shit.